everyone. Today's topic is war poetry. Welcome to IHN Academy's UGC NTA Net English class. So let's see what war poetry is. So first of all, war poetry. It encompasses the poetry written during and about First World War. So that is First World War poetry. It deals with the subject of war. And usually these poems are written by soldiers. So that is one feature of war poetry, that these poets are usually soldiers. It's also known as trench poetry. Okay, because trench is where they do war. So this is which kind of a testimony. And the poetry are yoked together and they register the violence they face, and also the war-torn male body was the central subject. So these people, the soldiers will be fighting and they are undergoing a lot of violence. So all these violence are being recorded. It's kind of a testimony. And then it's their entire body was war-torn. So war-torn male body also became a central subject in these poems. War poetry was set against Georgian poetry, that the poetry preceded it. Before war poetry, we had Georgian poetry. So what happened in Georgian poetry was, so in Georgian poetry, they presented war as a noble affair. They said that it is the ultimate duty of human being or the men in that community to go fight the war. It's noble affair. And they celebrate the soldier as a happy warrior. Oh, they are sacrificing their life for the good of the country. So they were praising their or glorifying their death. They're considered as happy warrior. They're proud to give their life for the country. They're proud to sacrifice their life. In that way only they described the soldiers. So here in the war poetry, what the poets, that is war poets are soldiers. Okay, what they did was they chose to represent the horror and pity of war. Instead of glorifying the war or instead of considering war as a noble affair, what they did was they represented war, they represented the horrors or the pity of the war as such. Okay, it is like in the Georgian poetry, it was a patriotic poetry, right? The poetry in which they consider the honors or sacrifices the bravery of soldier. They say that okay, the bravery and the sacrifice of soldiers are the ultimate thing. It is the duty of a soldier to sacrifice their life for the country. So that is kind of a patriotic poetry. But when it comes to war poetry, it is anti-war poetry. That is, they represented war not as something to glorify, but they represented the destruction and suffering of the war. So it's an anti-war poetry. They say that there's no need of war. Why do we need war? Why do we need to sacrifice our lives? This is what is happening. That is destruction, that is suffering. That is anti-war poetry. Then we have a witness poetry. Witness poetry are the poems written by people who are who experience the effects of war. They experience the effects of war in first hand. They are not the people who are participating in fighting. They do not participate in fighting. They are not soldiers. They are not the people who are participating in the fighting, but they experience the effect of war. They either witness the war, they will be there as because of the war, they will be trapped there, or they will be the relatives or the closely associated with the people who died. So that is witness poetry. Then the features of war poetry are they live in trenches. So the life in trenches are detailedly described. And then there were powerful imageries and figurative language in order to bring the realistic effects of war. So when the reader reads the poem, they kind of feel the realistic experience. We can feel the horrors of the war. Then it is more cynical about warfare. They question the need of war. So they combined it with an anti-war argument. That is, why do we need a war if we can live in peace? So it wasn't against the war. And war poetry is an against of Georgian poetry. It's again opposite of Georgian poetry. The central theme of war poetry includes injury, that is mental injury as well as physical injury. So they describe those injuries inflicted upon them. Elements of war poetry are identity, innocence, guilty, royalty, courage, compassion, humanity, duty, desire, death. All these becomes the elements of war poetry. Major war poets are Rupert Brooke, 1887 to 1915. Siegfried Sassoon, 1886 to 1967. Wilfred Owen, 1893 to 1918. Robert Graves, 1895 to 1985. Ivor Gurney, 1890 to 1935. Edward Thomas, 1878 to 1917. Isaac Rosenberg, 1890 to 1918. These are the major war poets. So when we'll be discussing about the war poetry in detail in our course, we'll discuss about each poet and their works. Okay. So this is about war poetry. It's very simple because after the First World War, we can even think about it, right? How the society will be affected, how all these affects them mentally and physically, and how it is being reflected in poetry. So read this once again. Thank you.